With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson hanging out with Greg Sailors and S.J. Jennings, exploring the kingdom, discovering the more, the life, the love, the freedom of God that is offered, promised, and we're in search of it. It's a amazing opportunity for believers to continue the journey, to move forward, to become more like Jesus. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is a big deal.
It's a big deal, and
it's the deal.
It's not serious, but it's important.
Oh, yeah, it's serious. It's very serious.
Unlike what just popped into my head, which when you said exploring the kingdom, Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom popped in the theme. You
gotta be over 45 to know what that even was. And it came on right before Disney.
Oh, yeah. Every time.
Disney.
Yeah.
I think that was Sunday nights, maybe.
Probably 7 o'clock or something.
Yeah, man. Marlon Perkins?
Something.
We gotta look that up.
Marlon Perkins.
He's always safe behind the camera narrating, and there's Jim wrestling with whatever, the python.
If you know who the name, if it's Merlin or Marlin or whatever it is, just email us exploringmore@zoe.org.
That'd
be great.
Presented with a company with survey-proven health insurance. Mutual of Omaha.
Anyway, we digress.
First one gets a Wild Kingdom knife.
Right.
We don't have those, by the way.
We got
Sharpies.
We have Kingdom knives.
Yeah,
that's right.
We have Sharpies. We'll write.
So the wild thing, let's turn this back around to pythons and dangerous things in the jungle.
Pitfalls, holes.
Oh, yeah. This
traps.
Space that we live in, this fallen world, is a dangerous place.
Mm-hmm.
It is a wild kingdom. There.
Nice transition.
We went full circle and brought it back. But it is. There's not one of us on the planet that has not been hit, has not been bitten, has not been somehow, some way scarred and marred by the prince of this dark world. And so as we're continuing our series on debunking prayer, and we're exploring more, what is it? What is prayer? I mean, I get so caught up, Greg, and I want to review the first two sessions because they were so important and so good, but we're going to press on and continue to explore and look a little bit deeper at this idea of different ways to pray and the significance of how we pray should evolve, right? Jesus taught his disciples how to pray. Actually, he taught them how they can pray, appropriate for fourth graders, appropriate for newbies, appropriate for their question. Would you teach us how to do that? Right? It's just like piano, right?
Start with chopsticks.
You start with the little disciplines, you know.
They actually, here's C.
Middle C.
You got to know where that is and go from there.
And there's an orientation to this.
Right.
Well said. There's an orientation to the keyboard. There's an orientation to guitar strings. There's an orientation to whatever you're going to learn to do. You have to start in some kind of basic premise of what that means. And so Jesus tells them, here's how you should pray.
It's how things work. You know, I was thinking about this the other day with our sons because they get some of those tinker boxes. There's all these boxes now in the world. You can go and order them, and you can get cigar boxes, or you can get tinker boxes for the kids, or plush toy boxes for SJ and things of that nature. Well, anyway, these engineering boxes come in for our boys, and there's a way that the things go together, and they have to follow the instructions or it doesn't work.
Yeah. I like what Eldridge says in his book, Moving Mountains, which is a great book on prayer. Highly recommend it. Eldridge says, most people don't even try to learn the ways of the kingdom. They just go about their days with a practical Gnosticism. hoping things work out, tossing up prayers like they hope to score on a Jesus lottery ticket.
Very true. And I know that's true because I live that way.
That's exactly what I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there for 25 years. We started with the kids' prayers. They just got a little more sophisticated, but I think back to graduations of the heart, graduations in the kingdom, and learning how to pray, learning the different facets of prayer. I mean, you think about any instrument, Greg. We enjoy music, but none of us are playing any instruments that I know of. I've never seen you pick up a guitar, or Greg, you with a saxophone.
I can play a mean recorder.
Yeah, harmonica.
Yeah. No, just a recorder.
After you have kids, you don't want a recorder in your home.
You don't.
So,
no.
But my point is, you can play a violin, and it's in many different genres. It can play different kinds of music. One instrument, but you hear them in country songs.
Yeah.
They're in classical and soundtrack music.
Yeah, classic rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin famously uses a full orchestra.
I was thinking like ELO, Queen.
Them too.
Some of the production of cellos and violins. And so prayer is like that. It can play and needs to play in some different genres. If you're just asking for things, you really are playing a recorder.
Yeah.
I think about the time I first experienced what I would call his home with Jesus, and there's a special place that he and I have, that we go to, and it's in my heart of hearts, in my mind's eye, where I connect with him. And so whether I'm in a beautiful place doing that or I'm in my proverbial prayer closet, there's that place of home, and it feels that way. In music, since we're talking about music, there's also a resolve in music. It's that time when you listen to music and you feel really good because it comes back. The melodies and all the different things come back to that spot or, that theme, and you feel that resolve. And I think that's really important to prayer. As we're talking about it, we want to find that place, that middle C, if you will, in order to know how things work and move forward.
Yeah.
With Jesus, because we're in just a much sweeter space with him.
Yeah. I think the image I have, SJ and Greg, is standing on the other side of a wall, writing stuff on a rock, putting some yarn or some rubber bands around it, and then chucking it over the wall. That's just how I had.
Hoping maybe someone's over there to read it.
And some listeners are going, man, that's pathetic. And yet that's how I was up until late 30s when I began to explore.
We've experienced that with many men we've worked with, too.
Oh, yeah.
Just chunk it over the wall and let's hope it lands. It's almost like playing skee ball, if you will, and you're trying to get, the 6,000 at the top.
Yeah. And you said it really well, Greg, a minute ago. We want to explore in these last two sessions of Debunking Prayer of how it works, how multifaceted it is, and how if you just know the kind of throw it over the wall kind of prayer, the heart's cry prayer, the this is what I got, this is what I need kind of prayer, there's a treasure chest. There's actually an armory that you're not accessing. And I want us to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have a question, though, that's come up before we move on into talking more about that, Michael. I mean, we have to start somewhere, right? We have to learn how to make a free throw. Let's go into another metaphor if we want to. I mean, this is a basketball.
Yeah, layups.
And when you're
dribbling.
a kid, you're just hucking it up there. You're not really passing it around. But then maybe you get into some teams. You might have a coach. Yeah, there's practices. There's layups. You have to practice with what you're capable of doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we touched on with Jesus teaching originally, like the Lord's Prayer. Yeah. Right. So for the encouragement for the listeners out there, what I don't want to do is drift into you don't have this figured out. It's a level you're not at or anything like that. I don't want anybody to feel condemnation. I think the listeners know we don't want that to happen. Right. And that's not our character. But I just want to give encouragement to the guy who's still at the place where he's hucking rocks over the wall, hoping it lands, maybe bonks Jesus on the head and gets his attention.
Right. To your point, if someone's feeling that, there's something more going on. The enemy's working, you feel accusation, diminishment, right, which is a part of what we're talking about.
Right.
If you're not monitoring what you feel and what you think, if you feel accosted by what we're saying, and that, you need to stop throwing rocks over the wall, man. You're underachieving. Come on, let's go.
Right.
I'm okay with that, but kindly.
Right, in an encouraging way.
Saying, Hank, stay with us. Then.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes God will give you a layup, He's like, all right, I got that one.
Yeah. But everything, like you said, Greg, has progression.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in the kingdom is that way, as it is on earth.
Right.
There's a progression of how things work and learning things. And a lot of times you learn from trial and error and experiments that haven't gone so well, and hopefully, you haven't lost a finger because you got too close to something that you shouldn't have. But in this case, as we move into this subject again, I want to talk about some different ways that we can pray and how this instrument that is given to us, communication with God, hearing Him, not doing all the talking, graduating from the monologue. What does it look like to do what you were talking about, Greg, of entering into time with Him?
Mm-hmm.
We said it last time. Cell phones have taught us you can do this almost without ceasing.
Right.
As often as you check, as often as you look, as often as you're summoned, as often as you hear the beep or the buzz or the whatever, that thing is talking to you. You're talking with it, through it, constantly. So if nothing else, let's explore what it looks like. We've already covered some basics, so I want to get into worship.
Yeah, it's a great place to start.
Yeah. How is worship prayerful?
My wife, most mornings, God gives her 2 or 3 lines of a song and draws her into intimacy through those lines of the song. And sometimes they're literally words that she's never heard before, and she'll look it up, song with these lyrics, and she'll find it. And it's just really a sweet spot. He doesn't do that with me.
Right.
I enjoy worship, but he doesn't do that with me, because his intimacy for me and his intimacy for her are different.
Yeah.
But she really comes alive in worship that way. For me, I love my time with him through worship, and I see really the notes, the progression of the music, and a theme of life. The words are moving you, and you're flowing through those things. And so I can get into a space where my hands start moving because of that, and which is interesting. I had a friend of mine ask me one time, what are you doing when you're doing this? And said, most people when they worship, they put their hands up, you're just doing this, and I said, well, I don't know.
This is an audio medium.
Yeah, I was about to say, so I'm doing this with my hands.
It looks like you're going across the keyboard.
I'm going across the keyboards, or I'm moving up with my hands to
hit high notes.
To say that's the high note or that's the low note. And yeah, I don't have any training when it comes to an actual instrument, but I've sung for a lot of years. So, I see those things, but God brings me back to that place of home, like I said earlier, or resolve. He brings me into that place of worship, which connects me to his heart.
Right.
Which I love.
You went where most people go with the word worship, and it's music. I'm not just talking about that.
No, I know.
I'm talking about a lot larger realm of worship, and music's a great one. You guys know I love soundtracks. I love what they represent. A Lord of the Rings soundtrack takes me into Middle-earth, takes me into the presence of a much larger story.
Right.
In which I can find myself worshiping. There's no lyrics. It sets a tone for my heart for intimacy.
Right.
And so lots of music like that can be helpful. I think another one is just in creation.
Beauty.
And yes.
I was going to say the beach is where I experience worship.
You a beach
the
guy?
Ocean.
Beach guy or mountain guy, Greg?
More the
mountain for me.
I've got about 60-40 mountain. But yeah, the beach, you cannot deny.
Sound of the ocean.
If you will
smell
get
of the
still.
Salt. Sunrise coming up over the water.
One of my best moments ever was in Alaska, and I had my friend Barry, who we were talking about earlier. He was with me, and I was hooked up to a fish with a rod that was way, way, way too light. And we were salmon fishing, and God just struck me with awe. And that's the best way I can put it. It was just awe of where I am, what I'm experiencing. And I was overwhelmed with worship.
So there's a posture in that is dialed in. There's a stillness to that. I mean, everything we just talked about, the word I think about is noticing. You have a consciousness toward that. And if you've experienced it once or twice, then you start actually looking for it.
Right.
Through worship, which I would say for our purposes is about entering into intimacy, intimate moments. On the end of a fishing rod, that's kind of God coming after you, standing on the end of a beach on a peninsula and looking out where there's just ocean at 280 degrees, and you feel the vastness and the invitation. That's a worshipful moment.
power.
You've entered into, brought your heart into, a space where God is. He's there, and yet he's even so much larger. So worship is a huge component of, I want to say, the prayerful life, this heart that's dialed into communication, connectedness, intimacy. Great word, Greg, from Chrissy. If worship is coming into his presence for, I'm going to say it like being loved, being seen, being known, those are all intimate words.
Mm-hmm.
And worship is a great way to enter into a prayerful posture of encountering and experiencing God and letting him have you.
Yeah, since we're all about some movie clips, the one that's coming to my mind, and honestly, it often comes to mind when I'm watching a sunrise, is from City of Angels. Now, I wouldn't use City of Angels to base your theology on, right? But there's a moment in that movie, if you remember, where one of the main characters is on the beach at sunrise, and the angels all gather and watch the sunrise together and sing like a heavenly chorus as the sun breaks the horizon to declare the glory of the Lord in the moment and for appreciation of the creation that he's created for us.
Yeah.
And again, it's a powerful moment every time we get to experience it. But I'm curious too, Michael, let's go into the holistic nature of the kingdom. I don't want to get off of prayer, but as you're talking about prayer, as you're talking about worship, I'm thinking part of learning to pray, learning intimacy with God, understanding depth of intimacy with God is getting your heart back. And how do you get your heart back? It's all interconnected is the point.
Yes.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah. That just takes me into, a whole other spectrum. It is interconnected. And without touching on one place and then kind of getting stuck back there, SJ, I think about, this is progression. There was a way we did it when we were boys, and there's a way we need to learn to do it as men and women. I ride in a car seat. Well, I didn't, but my kids did. My dad's big arm was the the car seat.
Yeah.
But, things have a way of evolving. And to take any relationship and see it come to new heights, to see it come to new depths, you're going to have communication and conversation, which brings me to this second thing that is really, really a way to expand and to deepen prayer is listening. Listening prayer.
Yeah, I experienced that this morning, Michael, just freshly this morning. I've got some challenges with weight I have in my life, most of my life, and I've been challenged by my doctors to make a particular change in my diet. And so as I was just praying about that, honestly, I was not praying fervently, if you will. I was kind of flippantly this morning, like, all right, Lord, today's the day. I got to start eating a certain way and not doing certain things. And then I felt drawn by God to go a little deeper. And, as I did, I found that there was this fear about diet and food and changes and all those things. And some of you guys that know my story know that I've lost and gained weight many times over the years. And so as I was moving into that and I was asking Jesus in a listening posture, what's up? What do I need to do? I heard three things. And the number one thing was, you're my beloved son, which that's been a theme in my life. It's one of the things God spoke over me before. The other one, which I'm still exploring a little bit, which was step into my fullness. And so that was another big one. And again, I'm listening, I'm waiting, I'm not asking, I'm just listening, and these things come up. So it was beloved son, step into my fullness. Then lastly, he said, we've got this, which is very hopeful, right? And if I hadn't have stopped and spent some time with Jesus just in silence and listening, I don't know that I would have heard those things.
Yeah. For those that really need the practical, I would say about how this works is there's a constant dialogue going on in all of our heads. I mean, thoughts are just moving like a stock market ticker, or like 6 levels of it. There's just a lot of movement in this space. It's pretty crowded. How we've taught it, how we've experienced and therefore taught it is there's you're a divided person. You have a false self and you have a true self. They each have a voice. Then you've got a kingdom of darkness, emissaries against you, opposition, the accuser of the brethren, and all these fallen angelic beings that are now demonic. And there's a way that works. I mean, yes, like you said, SJ, it's comprehend. We have to bring that into prayer. There's a way that works.
Right.
Guilt, shame, and fear have voices. They feel like something. And then you have the Spirit that lives in you. God lives in you, takes up residence in this place called the Holy of Holies, our hearts. And it's not speaking at you. It's actually, if you're a believer, that's critical, by the way, that then the access, he's taken up residence and he's at work in you. So the listening piece, most people have never done any inventory on where a thought's coming from. Oswald Chambers was one who taught me much about, if you want to know the origin of a thought, take that thought to its end, right? If it's good for you, if it's helpful, if it's kind, then you know that it's from the kingdom of God. If it's not, then it's not. So listening, another word for it would be discernment, discerning, to have a wise and discerning heart. But to know that I've got to look at these, actually pay attention, kind of get what we call this observation deck, get above my thoughts and all that's kind of swirling around in the torrent of the waters of my mind, and get above that and observe that. If you can get above that, that's actually you. Whoever, whatever you want to call it, that is, that's actually observing what's going on, the observer is the you. And that is in alignment with God. And if you don't practice listening and discernment, you're not going to be able to even know what to pray, how to pray. There's so much inventory available to you, and listening to your emotions, listening to the thoughts that come with them. The enemy cannot be the only one that has access to all that.
Yeah.
That does not make any sense to me at all.
Is he really the loudest voice?
So if the enemy's communicating, I mean, I don't pray to the enemy, but I sure can be subject to their suggestions. And if I've made agreements and alignments and, believed lies, then it's going to be in the way, right? Talking about lies, there's a couple we have to cover when we come back in just a minute from this quick break. We'll be right back with a little bit more on Debunking Prayer and the Exploring More podcast.
Holy, here we go again, Batman.
Hey, all you superheroes. Shattered by the rat race? Shift down to Godspeed by going to the Heart of a Warrior Encounter. Zoe has 3 upcoming encounter events. April 29 to May 2nd in Lynchburg, Virginia. May 27 to 30th in Stoneville, North Carolina. And October 21st to 24th in Buena Vista, Colorado. To learn more and register, go to zoe.org/events. That's ZOWEH.org/events. Capes are not required.
Welcome back, friends and allies, talking about prayer. And just before the break, I think we mentioned this, SJ. Remind me if we didn't. The beliefs we can have about God being distant, God being mad,
sure,
us not being good
Who
enough.
is God really?
That's a great place to do inventory. Who told you that?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel that? Why do you believe that?
Yeah, to that point, doing the inventory, as you get more and more of your heart back, what becomes more and more clear are these areas that maybe need a little bit more attention than others.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of start off with orientation on this journey of just understanding how things work and getting the big picture. And then we move into an exploration of our woundedness, what happened to us, healing from that, and the training that comes along with that healing.
Yeah.
And then as you move through the kingdom in this oriented way, you get revealed to you areas that you're still operating out of a JV system, a younger heart, kind of a boy's way of thinking of things. And prayer, I think, is what we're saying, is one of those areas that just does not get the attention that it needs in terms of our development.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And so I'm suggesting there's worship, not just singing, entering in, experiencing through beauty, through solitude, right? Then there's listening prayer, soaking prayer, centering prayer, imaginative prayer, major and minor themes in which you got to know what level you're coming in on when you're praying for this, and how it works when the work of Christ is a part of that. That's the expanse that I know to this point and a little bit more. So listening is just, you have to learn to listen. Listening prayer, if you're going to hear him speak, you got to make sure there's not some things in the way, but false beliefs about him, about yourself. But after that work is done, maybe renouncing, unsubscribing, call it confession, I believed a lie, and repenting, I don't believe that
And
anymore.
you might have to do it over and over again until it's true for you.
Because you'll hear the whisper, you're not good enough.
Right. Or you're still thinking that God doesn't hear you. It'll come back around.
And if you can slow things down, that's critical to listening and discernment. You have to slow it down.
Right. I remember, Michael, with the agreement that I made, that the only way that God would speak to me is through the Bible. So if I'm listening and I'm asking God things, or I'm just going through the buffet of prayers asking for things.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have some listeners that are in that agreement space.
Yeah, is that an agreement you made or one that was taught to you?
I think a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught that, but you still have to believe it at some point.
Oh, subscribe to it.
Right.
Give your consent. I mean, all of that stuff can happen when you're really young and can be affecting you when you're older.
Right.
The way the kingdom works, you want to get access to those files. What is it that I've learned? What is it I believe? What's my perspectives and attitudes about prayer? This is a great conversation to even start that and then get into, well, I don't really hear from God. We hear that all the time. I don't really hear from God, which I get a big grin and it's like, all right, get on the gurney.
Buckle up.
It's like you got to put a gown on and let there be a checkup. There's got to be some kind of physical, spiritually speaking, to find out what's going on. Why? It doesn't make sense that the most loving being in the universe does not have access to your heart and mind, right? And Christ, the renewing of your mind, the mind of Christ. That's going to take some work. And if you're going to be coached up in basketball from layup and chucking it up there to actually becoming proficient at somebody, you better have a guide. You better have a teacher. You better have some counsel. You better have somebody who actually wants you and can love you to that place of learning how.
It always fascinates me, Michael, about people that are willing to go and learn a particular skill. SJ, maybe it's in the construction world or accounting or whatever, your continuing education. I mean, people are about getting knowledge and about moving forward in their lives all the time. But when it comes to some of these things about intimacy and about God, they just don't go there.
Well, don't get me started.
I know.
Because
I'm trying to rile you up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in a society and a time in our civilization where we have more information thrust upon us than any other time in history. And information is not knowledge.
It is not.
No. Yeah. So listening, what are you listening to? Where's your information coming? Scriptures are great. Don't throw those away.
No,
Greg wasn't discounting those. He's just
not
saying
at all.
That is a place in which God can and does speak. But the listening, you can read scriptures and really not listen.
Right.
It can be as choreful and dutiful as anything else. And I want to talk about soaking. So we're talking about listening prayer, and we're talking about a couple ways that we've learned to actually listen. One of them is soaking prayer. Anyone you want to take a swing at what soaking prayer is?
So yeah, Michael, I remember my first movement into the soaking prayer world. It was during my college days. It was actually before the treehouse, which was kind of my movement into deeper intimacy with God, where Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the Father came and said, "You are my beloved Son." But I was in college and found myself at a very charismatic church. And this pastor said, "Hey, we're just going to listen this morning. I've got prayer, music, and I've got some scriptures that I'm going to stand up and speak over you. And there's a few other elders here at the church that have scriptures they're going to get up and say. We're going to do that for the next hour." And I'm thinking, hour? Oh, my Lord. Really? And they're like, "Yeah, just get comfortable in your seats, and there's some pillows at the back if you want to, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to be with Jesus this morning."
And let him and soak.
Right. And soak.
It's a great word, soak.
I'll never forget.
Marinade.
He said, "Don't write anything down either. God will bring it back up. Don't worry about it. You can trust him." And it was really well done, but I was so freaked out because, again, this is my even Wild at Heart days. This was when I was in college and had my more fundamental background in my mind. And a dear friend of mine, Jay, invited me to be there. And so I trusted him and took a nap.
You're making my point, bro. It's something we don't know how to do. So when we get into it and get put in that position, we get a little nervous. What are we doing? How do we do this?
Seems odd.
To get still and to invite him to speak over you, to invite him to give you what you need to hear. Now you're actually trying to climb, crawl, whatever that is, to that observation deck. Soaking prayer is practice of that. listening prayer, listening to your imagination. It's another category. Soaking prayer is a part of this, imaginative prayer. I'm saying this is advancing.
Right.
When people have asked us, would you please do a podcast on prayer?
Sure.
This is not a one and done, one session. We're going to probably do 4 of these. And yes, this is very, very much a part of what we're talking about. You need to YouTube Graham Cook and his prophetic soaking. You need to YouTube Laura Woodley.
Mm-hmm.
And those who can have a gift for actually sharing and speaking what we'll say prophetically over you. Scripture, biblical, but having the opportunity to listen and receive, take it in, soak in it.
Many people start that, I think, Michael, with Jesus calling, because, Jesus is speaking to them, as Miss Sarah did that
sentiment.
I'm speaking this over you. Graham Cook's beautiful at this. He speaks the Father's word or Jesus's words over you. I so love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's a listening. And here's what I found in listening, right? Even in podcasting, I'm listening to you guys, you're listening to me. SJ's over there kind of getting ready for what he's going to say. He's looking something up. I don't know what it is. You and I are kind of talking, but then one of you can share, and I'm thinking, okay, am I going to bring up one of the quotes that I've prepared?
Right.
As much as we kind of do this off the cuff, we got a few things that we've brought in our pockets, right? And I'm trying to listen, multitask. At the same time, what am I going to share? What am I going to say next?
Right.
We all do that, and it's okay, but you actually need to learn when to let some of that stuff go and to listen, right? Have you ever had your wife say, you're not listening? What was that story you had, you and Sherry in the truck? Have you told that story about listening?
Oh, yeah. We were in a lighthearted mood, so don't hear it as a
marital strife.
A serious point of marital strife. But, she said, I feel like you're not listening to me. And I said, well, you should only talk to me when I'm paying attention.
Mm-hmm. What I love about that, that's what we're talking about. Paying.
All of the listeners were just like, ooh, I'm surprised you're still alive.
But paying attention.
I am too.
This is about paying attention.
It is.
What we give our attention to. That is the definition of listening.
The blessing in that moment, again, it's a funny story, but it was a moment where God revealed to me, after I said that, God showed me that that's how I kind of interact with him.
Mm-hmm.
That's
right?
interesting.
Yeah.
What if our posture to advance in our prayer, in our conversation, I'm not ever going to strike prayer from the vocabulary, but in our conversation with God, in our intimacy with God, was paying attention and in the hope that we would receive from him.
Right.
That we'd receive word from him. When we're in trouble or we've had some kind of appointment, maybe medical, and you're getting a call, you're looking at that phone. Or you know that you have a loved one that's going somewhere and you want to know that they're safe, you're looking. You're giving attention to that phone. You're giving attention to the idea that I need to hear from them. Do you think most Christians walk around like that?
No, I don't think most people walk around like that. You said yeah, and you said
no. Yeah, that's a yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
No, I don't think most Christians do. I think most people struggle with it.
Yeah.
There's too much going on.
Or they would put it into, well, I'll hear from God in a space like the Heart of a Warrior encounter. They'll relegate it to a particular space or time, or retreat, or mountaintop
God,
experience.
I only want you to talk to me when I'm paying attention to you. Yeah. Other than that, God, just hold on until I make space for you in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about with what I said to Sherry. That's how I've approached God. God, just keep all your great ideas to yourself, hold on to them, make a list, and when I'm ready, I'll listen to you and you can download them to me. Yeah. That is crazy.
That's crazy. But
I've lived that way. Absolutely.
But one of the things I had to debunk was I thought so long, SJ and Greg, I thought if God was going to speak to me, it was going to be harsh. It was going to be about sin. It was going to be about my underachieving. And therefore, I'm back in Oz, and I really don't want to go see the big production where there's anger.
Yeah.
And I am actually getting a spanking.
But you're making my point about it being holistic. This journey is holistic because you have to engage in orientation, find that wound, find the root of it, get it out of there because it's in the way.
Very, very difficult to trust someone you don't love or to love someone that you're not sure you trust.
Yeah, the thing that really hits me as you're saying that is conviction, because conviction's a good thing, right? God has said, hey, I see a blemish or a stain there, and I'd really like to go there with you. And most, I know for me anyway, and I think we all would agree that in the beginning anyway, there was this lightning bolt that was coming. Remember in the other podcast, we were talking about our image of the Father. But the thing that I've learned now is conviction comes with hope. It doesn't come with you dirty old fill in the blank. That's the enemy. Back to tracking that thought to its origin or to its end, that comes from the enemy.
Rather than you dirty old fill in the blank, let's call it let's call it condemnation, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's a difference between conviction and condemnation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Shame, guilt.
Condemnation comes with shame and guilt, like you said. Conviction comes with
an invitation.
Right.
It does.
It's, listen, honey, that's hurting you. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to be hurt. I mean, it's care, consideration, all of that.
But we're so used to correction being harsh and personal and some kind of indictment by others. We project that on God. To your point, Greg, this is some of the holistic approach, how you do relationships, how you see yourself in relationships. Are you the problem? That belief that you are. All of that comes into another relationship, another conversation with the one who loves you the most. So just to hit this one more time, if Jesus says he has to leave, John 15, 16, 17, so he can make room for the Spirit, and the Spirit will guide you, counsel you, teach you, comfort you, and convict you. That's all going to be loving. It's all going to be critical. And if you're not experiencing that, then something's in the way. Some belief, some attitude, something's in the way. And if you want that and you want to pray, right? Here we are, pray that. Ask, seek, and knock, right? If you want to ask, seek, and knock for God, Father, Son, Spirit, I want this. I want to know your voice. When you put that stake in the ground, training's begun.
That's right. Yeah, and with training comes the understanding.
Trials and errors.
I've got to do some things differently. I might need to let go of some things. I might need to make space. I mean, you played basketball at the collegiate level, and I mean, it takes a lot
I sat on a lot of benches, yeah.
It takes a lot of time, though.
Oh, yeah.
It's an investment. Training is an investment in time. It really is. You've got to be willing to take the time to be trained.
And we're not talking about quiet times, friends.
No.
And we all have morning time like that. The 30 minutes of this or the 40 minutes of that, or maybe it's an hour or two.
The discipline of that is not a bad thing, but it's not what we're talking about.
No, we're talking about when I get up from there and I take the dogs out, for me personally, when I take the dogs out one more time for 10 minutes, I'm listening. God has met me in those woods over and over and over and over again.
He stopped you from stepping on a copperhead a couple times too. Yeah.
But paying attention, listening. You can hear the birds, depending on what time of year it is, what it sounds like on the ground. I'm watching, and there's a lot going on. Sometimes I'm on the phone, making my first call or checking in somewhere. But there's enough time, Greg, when I can gear down. That's the life that we're talking about moves a little slower, right? Godspeed. If you're busy, your schedule is running you. But we're promised a full life, an abundant life, and that is a schedule that we actually get to run. So in this conversation that we got to keep talking about is these different kind of prayers. In the next episode, I really want to talk about these major and minor themes, go back to the daily prayer, give our friends and allies some encouragement there, and then talk about spiritual warfare and prayer and how critical that is. So
yeah, let's do it. Listeners, if you want a copy of the daily prayer or you want to listen to us read it to you, go zoe.org/store and then just search for the daily prayer, and you can download that along with a bunch of other resources for free. If you have questions or comments for us, please email us exploringmore@zoe.org. And if you give us a like and a share on the podcast platform of your choice, that would really help us out, help us to be found, help this message get out. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, SJ. We'll see you next time, I hope, on the Exploring More podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, With God, there is always more, and you were made for more.